Now there's a South African variety of this, and there's an East African variety of this, and some believe that they should be in different genera. Some say it shouldn't be even Australopithecus robustus, it should be Paranthropus, a completely new genus, Paranthropus robustus, for example. Other people say no, it belongs within the genus of Australopithecus. We can get into that if you took a physical anthropology course or a more advanced course. We could get into the taxonomy and essentially splitting and lumping in biological taxonomy. Splitters tend to divide out and say, well, there are all these details that you have to keep in mind, and so we need to, this is a new genus, and this is a new genus, this is a new. Lumpers tend to essentially say, well, those are all interesting variations, but still, generally speaking, these all fit within the one genus, for example. And so a lumper would say, well, it doesn't matter, the South African variety, the East African variety, the hyper-robust, the less hyper-robust. The lumper would say it doesn't matter, they're all robust Australopithecines. So we'll just call them robust. In the same way, there is a lot of variation within the graciles. But again, enough variation to call them a different species. Same genus perhaps as robust, but a different species. That is, their teeth don't get near the size of the robust. They don't have this very distinctive, what's called a sagittal crest, this crest of bone that runs along what's called the sagittal plane, right down the body in anatomical terms. The sagittal plane here, a giant sort of mohawk, a fin of bone that's used as attachment points for the huge muscles that would descend down here and attach to the jaw for chewing. Robusts have this distinctive bony crest called the sagittal crest. Graciles never have it. So, gracial Australopithecines, robust Australopithecines, and then here is early Homo. And early Homo, very interesting creature. This is, actually, let me show you this one first. This is KNM-ER East Rudolph 1813. And this is a specimen that for 30 years people have been going back and forth and trying to identify whether this is a gracial Australopithecine or whether it's early Homo. And people are divided. Nobody can really prove it one way or another. And perhaps we don't even have a name for it, right? There's a gradation. And it's essentially, you can even see quite clearly, I think, just visually, I lay these out. You can see how sort of intermediate it appears between gracial Australopithecine, KNM-ER 1813, and Homo habilis. They both have a slightly larger brain case in relation to the rest of the face, for example, than does gracial Australopithecine. They both have slightly smaller teeth. You can't see them in this Homo habilis, but you can see them in others. They have slightly smaller teeth than in the gracial Australopithecine. And so again, many people would say that you have gracial Australopithecines and they evolve into something intermediate, and then you get the evolution of the genus Homo, the origins of the genus Homo. So here's Homo. You know about its physical characteristics from the handouts and the PowerPoints and so on online. The characteristics include a larger brain case now, and this is now getting to what we call encephalization. This is getting to be a brain case that is really conspicuously large. The brain is conspicuously large in relation to the rest of the body for a mammal. And we start to see a cranial capacity, something on the order of 800 to 700 to 800 cc's for Homo habilis. And you start to see a trend, which is the shifting away from emphasis in the evolution of this hominid, a shifting away in the emphasis from the biological adaptations and a shifting towards their cultural and artifactual adaptations. Now this is one of the most important lessons of all of anthropology. How is it that humanity differs from the rest of the life forms? We start to see it with the evolution of early Homo, and this will go right into what you're thinking about for your papers. With early Homo, you begin to see this phenomenon. I did mention it very early on in the class, the decoupling of behavior from anatomy. Critically important. For the robust Australopithecine, you remember, which becomes extinct around 1 million years ago. For the robust Australopithecine, adaptation and survival are based on, are founded on, and depend entirely on their anatomy, their anatomical structure. Their giant teeth are used to process their food. And if their teeth fall apart or they get a bad infection or something, they can't do anything about that. They die. Whereas with humanity, with the genus Homo, we begin to see an increase, a significant increase in the use of things like this. A chip of stone or a block of stone, a few chips have been knocked off, or even perhaps a sharp piece of bone. You splinter a piece of bone and you can get pieces that are sharp enough to cut your hand. You begin to see hominids or Homo using tools to survive. And they're using those tools instead of relying on their anatomy to survive. The decoupling of behavior, what they can do, the way that they survive, all the things they can do, the decoupling of that from their anatomical heritage or their anatomical structure. Robust Australopithecines are restricted in their behavioral repertoire, just like a crocodile. A crocodile's behavior, that has a range of things that it can do, but generally speaking, its anatomy restricts its range of behavior. That is the coupling of behavior with anatomy. By decoupling behavior from anatomy means that the organism is able to do things that the anatomical structure is unable to support. And in the case of Homo, it's through production of artifacts. Objects like this, a chipped stone. What is the use of this? What does this do for early Homo? It allows it to do things that the body of early Homo can't do. It allows it, for example, to process the carcass of an animal. It can use this to open up the carcass of an animal laying on the savanna, and that carcass contains a lot of calories, essentially, that the hominid can eat. Homo could never get their hands on the animals, the antelopes or a cheetah or whatever the animal, the herbivores. Homo could never get their hands on it. Imagine trying to chase down a deer or something like this on the open grassland. You can't do that as a hominid. You can't do it. What you can do, though, is start to scavenge. And what we see with Homo is the early use of tools to do what the body can't do in the evidence of scavenging. They start to cut up carcasses, and we can see cut marks on the bone from these carcasses. And we can see, around 2 million years ago, hominids start using stones to process animals, to process carcasses. And that's a critically important development. Robust Australopithecines become extinct at about 1 million years ago. We're not sure why. Perhaps they didn't have the behavioral or cognitive variation capable of surviving with some or adapting to some change in their environment. Gracial Australopithecines evolve into early Homo, consensus view probably, and then early Homo continues on into all the forms that we're going to see through the rest of the class. So there we are, Gracials, an intermediate form, early Homo, modern human, robusts who become extinct. Tool use to decouple behavior from anatomy, clearly beginning in a significant way with early Homo. And when you get to modern humans, this is the skull of a modern human being, you can see a very significant decoupling of behavior from anatomy. This is an animal that can't survive, cannot live without its tools. Take all of your clothing off. You won't last very long before you become hypothermic in cold conditions or hyperthermic in hot conditions. We have those tools, those clothing even to shield us, to keep us warm or to keep us cool. Our teeth are tiny. We can't process many foods. We pre-process our foods with tools, from a stone mill to make grain, to make wheat out of grain, to make flour from grain, and that traces all the way back to the earliest use of tools with early Homo. Important concepts to keep in mind for the origin or for the selective environments of early Homo.